If you would all please rise and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I want to apologize to staff for not making the CIP meeting. This is a bad time of year for me in the office, and I just couldn't tear myself away. I'm sure it was fascinating, though, that I missed. Anyway, at this time, do we have any comments from the audience on non-agenda items? Okay, hearing none. Regarding the corrections to the agenda or consent calendar, it's been requested that consent item 4C be pulled from the consent calendar and brought forward for discussion as action item 6F. So we'll do that. And is there anything else anybody has to do with that? No? We're good. So why don't we do this? I will move for the adoption of the consent calendar except for item 4C, which will be pulled forward.
I'll second that.
Look at how quick the voting came up today. It's running well. And that passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. 6A, is Julie here? Okay. 6A. All right, mine says Julie, but I'll take anybody from Shannon on down.
We're desperate at this point.
Anyway, this is for the 2018 Marlette Waterline Meter Installation Project. Let me, hop to that action item. So on March 5th, we had 8 contractors attend the mandatory pre-bid. Bids were opened at the district offices on April 5th at 10 a.m. 2 bids were received for $793,627. Was the low bidder, which was Thomas Hayne Company. They were the apparent low bidder. We reviewed the bids for conformance with bidding requirements. Let's see. Funding for this project requires that bidding comply with certain other requirements, including completion and submittal with the bid of certain grants form and outreach for disadvantaged communities for the DVE's compliance. Staff has performed a review of the bid from Thomas Hayne Company, and with respect to these items, all required forms were completed and submitted. In their DVE good faith effort forms, we identified there were 2 minor deviations with the requirements. And these were clarified during the follow-up. And so with that, staff are recommending that we award the 2018 Marlette Waterline and Meter Installation Project to Thomas Hayne Company in the amount of $793,627, and that we may waive those minor deviations to the DVE form. Can I answer any questions?
Anybody have anything?
I'm okay with it.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
And that passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay, laboratory summer interns.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Daniel Arce. I have worked here at the district for the last 23 years in the laboratory, and it's a fairly significant day for me. It's the first time I have addressed the board, a full board at that.
What took you so long?
Yes, I never had to request for any substantial amount of anything until today. So I am here to request that the board approve a contract with the Blue Ribbon, the Blue Ribbon Personnel is their name, so that we may hire 2 lab interns this coming summer for the amount of $18,000. You may or may not be aware that the lab is losing 2 of its full-time employees at the end of this month, in about 10 or 11 days now. Our lab director and the lab technician with the most experience in the lab is going to be leaving. It's going to be leaving just 3 of us full-time employees to carry the load of the lab. We expect the summer to be quite busy. I just heard a request for new water lines in Marlette. I know Evo always has many projects brewing in the summer, and just regularly, summers tend to be quite busy. We intend to have these interns help out with many of the tests that we do here internally so that we may do process control in the wastewater treatment plant. We expect them to go to Alpine County to collect all the samples we're expected to collect there, and as I believe a few new ones too that Evo wants us to collect. And we also expect the interns to help out with testing water mains, not just with new projects and water meters, but there's always water line breaks and so forth. It's going to be a tough summer, no matter what, if we end up having to train 2 new people, but sort of looking forward to it. I understand that this sort of request and for this amount of money usually goes in your consent calendar. I thank you for the time to hear me out here today. I believe Shannon wanted to see me make a request and not watch it, and it figures it'd be something straightforward enough like this. So I asked that the board please move so that we may hire 2 summer interns for the amount of $18,000 from the Blue Ribbon Corporation. Well, what is it called? I'll learn their name soon enough.
You didn't botch it. You did great.
Yeah, except for that, right?
I've known this guy a long time. He's good. I'm good with that.
After Terry and Phyllis retire, Dan will be in the acting interim laboratory director until we finish the hiring process.
Well, that was going to be my question is how long do you think, are you going to fill both those positions, by the way? And what's your time frame you think on filling those?
We plan to be doing interviews the first week of June and do the hiring at that stage. And for the laboratory director, and then almost immediately after that, within essentially the next week, we will be doing interviews for the lab technicians.
I tried to get Terry to let me go out with him in the boat on Indian Creek, and if I put a line over the side, no problem, but he wouldn't do it. So
Yeah, just don't mention the line.
So you're anticipating your workload is such that even when you get those 2 spots filled, you'll still need these interns through the end of the summer?
Well, to break it down in details, one of the interns, we have her in mind, would be able to start as soon as you approve in early May, but she will be leaving for the month of July. So we will only have really 1 intern at the time. We intend to stagger them. So yes, we expect to still have a need, even as we fill those positions. Regardless, we will be training 2 new people.
thank you.
All right, very good.
Questions?
I think we need a motion.
I'll move that we approve a contract with Blue Ribbon Personnel for 2 temporary lab intern positions in an amount not to exceed $18,000.
I'll second that.
Well, you did such a good job.
Thank
That
you
was
very much.
5-0.
5-0. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good hockey score.
Okay, property insurance program. Nancy, you have something for us? Looks like you have some guests.
I'd like to introduce Lydia Watkins and Karen Feasing from the Aqua JPIA. They've been really helpful for me in comparing their program with that of CSRMA, answering all my myriad of questions and patience with all the dumb ones too. But they're here today to help answer any technical questions you may have. The write-up is fairly straightforward, but what I wanted to do is go to the attachment, the program comparisons. And there's actually, in the note on number 2, that discount is not for the multiple program discount. That figure of $147,845 includes a credit of $33,601. That's for the $25,000 level deductible, so they give a credit or a discount for a high deductible. The deductible we have here is $25,000. That's what we've had with CSRMA. And then further down on the quote is where we get a $3,361 discount for having 2 programs. We have the workers' comp with them that we just changed a couple months ago. That'll be effective July 1st. And then hopefully we'll be getting the property. So this 2% discount will apply both to this policy, the property policy, and the workers' comp program as well. And then if we were to, the next program to look at is the liability. And if we do switch the liability, then we'd get a 5% discount on each of the 3 programs. The other thing that is completely different with the Aqua JPIA plan is that it includes earthquake and flood coverage, which we do not have with CSRMA. So even though their premium is $40,000 higher, we're getting 2 huge pieces of coverage that we didn't have before. And in addition, the savings with the workers' comp program has increased because of the 2% discount. So we're saving $54,903 on workers' comp, which effectively pays for the $40,000 difference in property.
I didn't think I'd have any questions, but when it comes to flood, where does the flood count? Just this property, out in the field?
All the district's assets.
All the
right?
district
All the
properties.
district's assets?
Yeah,
then
and there's 2 different
good.
or 3 different zones. There's zones A and B, which are the high flood zones, and those only have $10 million worth of coverage, whereas the other regular zones, I guess is what they're called, has a $25 million coverage.
Alpine County as well?
Yeah.
And these zones are established by FEMA.
Yeah, I was gonna say, based on the FEMA flood maps, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
We've been purchasing flood insurance for just our 5 properties that fall in the high flood zones, and that's been $38,000 a year just for 5 properties. That's not through CSRMA, it's through a private broker,
So you'll be able to drop that.
and we'll drop that, yeah.
So interesting on just a little side on the earthquake coverage. For residential earthquake coverage is a very interesting thing. A lot of times they exempt foundations and they have caps, and it's really kind of worthless in a lot of cases. So what is your policy on that?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm Karen Thiesing, Director of Insurance Services for Aqua JPIA, and ours is not restrictive. Ours is very broad. In fact, we do build in the $2.5 million within this program, and we also, because we have about 11 districts that buy excess earthquake on top of this, which is a dedicated limit to them. But because of the unique nature of being public entities, we don't have restrictions that you sometimes will see in the private sector.
I'm just curious. Thank you. Well, I read through this. Insurance is way more complicated than you would figure. So good job for all the work you put in on this. That being said, has anybody got any questions on this?
Just I want to make sure I clarify. So you said savings on workman's comp by incorporating the additional insurance policies save you 2%, right?
5, I think
So
it
it
was.
saves us $54,000
Total on the workman's comp.
workers' comp.
And if you don't incorporate those others, then you don't get that discount.
If we don't get the property, then we save $50,000 on workers' comp just in its own.
So it's irrelevant. So the other insurance doesn't actually affect the discounted workman's comp.
It increases the savings.
Okay.
I'd just like to comment. I'm the representative for the JPIA, so we got a meeting here in a couple of weeks. I'll be there. But I'd just like to say that I think this is a good idea. They're very organized. Andy Sell has done a great job in directing and keeping costs down, and has a very efficient organization there. So I think this is a good decision to move.
Yeah, it appears that way to me too. So we'll give it a go. providing we get the votes. We'll see. Motion, anybody?
We'll be looking at the liability program at the beginning of May and come to the board by the latest on the June 21st meeting.
I move that we authorize the district to join the California Water Agency's Joint Powers Insurance Authority Property Insurance Program effective July 1st, 2018.
Seconded. Acting funny there, Bill.
Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you, Nancy, and thank both of you for coming up here.
Yeah, thank you for coming up.
And we look forward to a long and mutually rewarding relationship.
Yeah, based on what I've seen on this part of it, I think you probably got the inside light on the next part of it, but we'll see. Okay, resolution for Bureau of Reclamation Smart Water Grant.
Good afternoon. So you've seen a lot of these resolutions over the years. They're typically required for grant funds because they want the board to be aware that we're seeking these grant funds and what impact that may have on the district. In this case, this is another Bureau of Reclamation grant. We've been fairly successful with these grant applications over the last couple years, so we're going to keep trying and hope that trend continues. This particular grant is for 6 of our largest water pump stations. We'd like to add some power that would send information back to the SCADA system so that we can see what's going on with those in the hopes that we have some water savings through operations on those. So it's $299 max on Bureau of Rec side with a 50% match, which we're going to meet with El Dorado County Water Agency funds and staff time. That's kind of it. Any questions on that?
Well, I always want to take the opportunity to thank you for the work you've done. And what a lot of people don't realize is once you have a grant, that's when the real work begins. Keeping track of everything, every grant you've got, and how you meet all the requirements can be really tricky and very time consuming. So I appreciate the tedious work that you have to do in order to get victories. So that being said, I move that we adopt Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Program Resolution number 3082-18, approving grant funding for water infrastructure efficiencies project.
I'll second that.
I ran out of breath.
And that passes 5-0. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess that brings us to payment of claims.
I'll move approval of payments of claims in the amount of $1,813,611.93.
Second.
And that passes 5-0. Next up, we have item 6F, which in your packet is consent item 4C. Eva's going to talk about the Southwide feasibility study.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm not going to take a lot of your time with this, but last Friday, after the item C was submitted to the board, the bid from the estimate from Carson Pump, I was notified that there was a change in schedule with the well driller, and they want to break the project up into a couple phases, and there's going to be like a 4-week hiatus between the 2 phases of work that's going to be done for the investigation. And there's a lot of equipment, large 500-barrel storage tanks that are like 40 feet long and 8 feet in width that are going to be parked along the side of the road, and temporary water treatment storage systems, GAC filters, transfer pumps, hoses, all that kind of stuff. I don't feel comfortable with leaving that idle sitting out there on the work site for 4 weeks when we're waiting for the driller to come back. So what I did was I asked the subcontractor to give me another quote to basically do a second mobilization, a breakdown of his equipment, get it off the site, clear the site, and then we'll come back and we'll mob again. And so I did get a quote to do that second mobilization, and it was $9,300, and that's the second estimate, estimate number 2028. And so what I'd like to do is ask the board to then accept the change in the board agenda item 4C and basically tack on the initial estimate, the Carson pump estimate number 2025, and also approve the Carson pump estimate 2028. And that would change the total value of that item to $39,860.
Can you expand on why you don't feel comfortable and you think it's worth the $9,000 to break that all down and then reassemble it?
Sure. First off, we're a joint, we have an access agreement with the city and also Liberty Utilities to go across their property to the work site. Having that set up for a month, that's going to impose on Liberty Utilities. It's also going to impose on the city. Having that equipment out there parked on the side of the street is also a liability. You're going to have traffic control up there over the entire month because we're going to be partially in the right-of-way on Eloise Avenue. If somebody, has a little too much fun at the American Legion Hall next door, and runs into that tank, that could be a big problem. I don't feel comfortable with doing that, and I think it's worth the extra amount, the $9,300 for that second mob.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
I'm just curious, how long does it take to tear it down and put it together? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, it's it's probably going to be one full day. You have to put up sound barriers, and you have BMPs that you have to take down, and all that kind of stuff for the project. And then it's moving that tank. You have to truck that tank on and off the site. They've got to, all that equipment's coming up from Carson City. So, there's costs that go along with it. That's again, I think this is the prudent thing to do. And
mob and demob is going to be done on a weekend too, isn't it?
It's got to be done outside normal business hours.
So we don't disrupt Liberty's operation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, do we need to amend the dollar amount on this motion here that's listed in 4C? To
not going to
something like
Gary, but if you add the two estimates together,
$39,860.
Yes.
How's that sound?
Cheap insurance.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move that we approve the change for the additional $9,300 for the mob and demobilization of the tank at the testing site on, is it Eloise?
Yes. 950.
Plus the original $30,560.
Right.
Yeah. The total. Yeah.
For a total of, I'm sorry, can you say what the total?
$39,860. It looks like to me.
$39,860.
My head.
That was.
I'll second that.
Melanie will clean that motion up, won't you, Melanie?
Make it look like one sentence instead of four.
I make you guys look good, right?
Yeah, right.
And just to add, that is going to be covered by the grant.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And that passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ivo. Okay, this moves us to standing and ad hoc committee reports. I will start off. We were supposed to have the city ad hoc committee meeting on Friday morning. Turns out Friday was the day that kind of controversial letter by Brooke Lane hit the paper. And so it ended up that nobody showed that morning. And I'm thinking they were just a little distracted and we weren't in the forethought of their thinking. So Richard and Dwayne and I had a little chat on just about everything. So that's all there is to report on that one.
Was that one supposed to be here?
It was here.
It was,
Yeah.
it was
And you know, I was thinking at the time to kind of call the city offices and ask where they were. Given what happened the next few days, I'm really glad I didn't.
Well, nobody's there to answer the phone.
Sometimes it's nice to be in
There's
the
nobody
spotlight,
there.
not being in the spotlight.
Right.
I did call to confirm the next few meetings and I haven't heard back.
Yeah. Well, you know, that committee consists of Brooke and Wendy, and I imagine it's a little icy between the two of them right now, so I don't know how that's going to go. So we'll see. Any other standing or ad hoc committee reports?
Yeah, we had operations committee meeting. Were you going to say something, Richard?
No, we'll go ahead. There is another committee meeting we got to report on.
Had operations committee meeting that I attended last Monday. We had a long discussion on the emergency plant generator that is being delayed because of the fact that the FEMA grants, we've got several of those that are coming in, and but we haven't gotten them, so we can't really start on it. We don't have the money to move ahead ourselves, so but they could come in with over $1 million. I'd like, John, were you or Shannon? Okay, I think you need to hear this because it's important and it affects a major piece of equipment in the plant here.
Additional updates since the operations committee meeting. So for the plant sorry, thank you. So I don't get the evil eye from Melanie. The plant generator project, we applied for 3 loans. Each one of those loans, or excuse me, not loans, but grants. Each one of those grants was to the tune of about $1.2 million. There were 3 of those. They were through FEMA and Cal OES. The first one of those is actually, we've received notification that we did not receive that grant. And then the other 2 loans for the same amount of money, and it's not they're not cumulative. We would either get one or none, so it's only $1.2 million total. The key kind of dates here are August 1st of this year. We've already entered into contract with the Cal Electro, am I correct, to do the project, and we're working with them currently. They're going to be starting and doing work here in the plant. That August 1st date is critical because that's when they would actually be authorized to start the work on the generator portion of the project. And if we start them with that, if they start that work before the grant is approved, if we were going to be awarded a grant, we would no longer get any of that money.
Really?
And so August 1st is a critical date for us. If we go beyond August 1st and letting the contractor begin the work, then we're going to end up going through 2 winters without a new generator. And right now, we're already going to go through the next winter without a new generator. And in talking with the staff who have their hands on these pieces of equipment, both from the mechanical side and the electrical side, they have high concerns already with going through another year with that generator. If we end up in a period where we've got to run that for an extended period of time, There's a lot of they have a lot of questions whether that unit will survive an extended run. They have questions whether that unit will actually operate, period. So that raises a lot of concerns for us. That August 1st date is critical. As part of this grant program, there's also a 60-day period where they would review the environmental document, and that then pushes us back to June 1st. And our preference is actually to have a little bit more time to notify the contractor to get them working. But if we have to go to a June 1st deadline for confirming that we're moving forward with the project, that is what it is. So we're starting, and well, obviously it's mid-April right now, so we're 45 days or so from a real firm deadline of when we can confirm and move forward with this contractor without knowing whether or not we're going to receive these grant funds. A lot of competition for these funds. In the two grants that we're looking at, the first one is really we've received notification on the first one that we're not going to get it, so that's out the door. The second one is what we're continuing to watch right now. The third one we wouldn't know, we're not projected to know until October, and so really we're planning to notify Cal OES that we're no longer interested in those funds, so they can pull our application, because it's just too far out. It would guarantee that we're going to go through 2 years. So we're still a little bit up in the air waiting to hear from them. $1.2 million is a lot of money. However, the contractor has come back. We've looked at what the potential delay costs would be for if we were to have to put a pause on the contractor in order to get the grant funds. That would impact us. They're saying, well, give us an estimate, give us a ballpark amount of $100,000. Quite honestly, we think that number is really low. We think we would likely be looking at twice that. I think would be a better number to evaluate for the delay cost and the potential risk to the district if we do have to go through a second winter and we had a failure and we had a spill or weren't able to meet our waste discharge requirements because we didn't have a generator here. That penalty cost could be quite high. I think when we've seen high penalties from our regulators in the past for us and other agencies, it's when those agencies made decisions to save money up front and then something happened and they end up having a spill, that's when those penalties can tend to grow pretty high. And so since we have a process that if we move forward with and don't receive the grant for $1.2 million, we can still move forward with the project. I think there is a pretty high risk of going forward and delaying the project through a second winter. So at this point, we're looking at, again, a firm decision point, I think, of June 1st. We've got to hear from Cal OES whether we've received those funds or not by that date. If we don't, we would be advocating that we go ahead and move forward with the current funding of the project, which is funded through, the majority of it is funded through a private loan, which we are familiar with and we've approved previously, but also recognizing that the project came in at $1 million over budget. So it's definitely having budgetary impacts within the capital plan.
So if I read you right, even if you make the decision on, you're not sure on the grant on June 1st, and you make the decision to go ahead because you're just not willing to risk it, it still could come in before August 1st, right?
That is right. It is possible that it could come in before August 1st, and we could try and expedite a review, but trying to get Cal OES to expedite anything is a lot of work. But we have discussed that we would want to deploy all of our resources to get them to expedite that review process.
What, if you don't mind, what is the environmental, is it a neg deck or is it a full environmental?
It's actually, I believe it's category exclusion, am I correct? And we've actually already done the environmental document. We've done that work, it's already been approved and it has been completed because we were pursuing SRF funds for the project. So we've gone through the environmental permitting project. The 60-day window is really for them to review it, the Cal OES folks to review and approve that. Am I stating that correctly, Lynn? Okay. So it's really their review window that they have set aside for us that they have to do that. They of course can take longer than that, and so that again, there's potential impacts to us with respect to timing that are very complicating and potentially costly for us in the district. If we receive the grant funds, they say they're going to give us the funding, we would want to do everything we can, I think, to ask for them to expedite that and be kind of going to them hat in hand, asking for them to do that. And we'll reach out to our legislators and others to try and get support to do that.
This August 1st date with the contractor, is this have to do with his scheduling related to October 15th?
No, it's actually our schedule. We set that in the contract documents for beginning the generator work because we looked at the schedule of activities that needed to take place and with the sequence of construction, and that's the date we needed the contractor to start work on the generator portion of the project in order to complete it and only lose one winter's work in order to not have that new generator.
What I was wondering is if there was any kind of a small window of flexibility, like 3 weeks or a month or something on that date.
We could certainly work with the contractor on that, and I would expect there would be some negotiation.
Because I'm assuming there's a certain point of view where you know you're going to lose the season.
Yes.
But there's probably some wiggle room that you could start later but not lose the season.
Right. It just continues to put us in a vulnerable position with that contractor for any delays that happen later, and any slack that happens that causes us to go to another winter that's going to be on us.
Right.
Any of that cost.
I mean, some of his activities are tied to the construction schedule in Tahoe, and if we don't get any snow for the whole fall, then we would actually have more time to get things done. Right. But you can't, at this point, you can't assume you're going to get an extension beyond October 15th.
Yeah, if it's raining like crazy October 15th, there's no extensions.
$1 million bet is what it is.
Yeah.
That was our schedule. That's something that we evaluated, put in the contract documents. That's not the date that the contractor set for us, but it's what he has scheduled his time around.
And what's the air quality date on that generator? It's down the road even further?
2020.
2020, okay. So we're kind of up against that too.
Correct. Yeah, but I think with the ARB, the Air Resources Board folks, from what we're understanding, they're willing to give us a pass on that as long as we're working.
As long as you're moving in the right direction.
I think if we were in mid-project, it wouldn't. I don't expect that we would get penalties. That would be an issue.
I'm going to meet with staff and try and analyze the impacts of going through one winter or two, and what were the risks of not doing it.
Right, and that's what we looked at. That's the meeting that we had where we found out that we have not received the first grant and have talked with staff about the consequences of going through 2 winters. And we've been talking with them all along about this project and our concerns and issues. What I continue to hear from them, or what we're hearing from them now, is that they're getting more and more concerned about that generator, particularly the controls, recognizing the issue really isn't the motor itself. It's not the diesel engine that is driving the generator. It really is the controls that have to sense the power demand and ramp up or ramp down to provide the appropriate amount of power. Those controls were really cobbled together for this generator in the guy's garage. And this is not a modern fabricated system. They cannot get parts to replace components. Literally cannot get parts. They have cannibalized the existing portions of those controls in order to make it work and keep the critical components running. I mean, they said they literally, of course, every time they start that generator, they get everything ready, and then they stand away and they get ready right next to the escape hatch, and they start it. That's really concerning for me, both from a staff safety perspective and and for the equipment to actually operate. So
just
an item that
this is out of our hands, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we can't do anything at this meeting anyway. But I thought it was real important that the board be notified, where we stand with it. That it's such a critical part of our operation.
And as we get closer to the deadline date, keep us informed.
Absolutely.
Thanks for doing that.
And Paul's going to tell us where he's going to get the money from.
From another one of our projects.
Maybe John. He's hiding $224 million, from what I understand, for water projects. Just a comment from the finance point of view. Obviously, it's extremely difficult to leave a potential grant on the table that's sitting out there. But during the meeting that Shannon was talking about, the people were in the room that are responsible for maintaining and operating that generator. And when they said that they truly believe every time that thing is fired up and switched over to provide power to the building, that's got a 50-50 chance of failing, that was significant and obviously an eye-opener for me. And on top of that, if there is a failure, there's also significant costs involved in going out and getting other backup generators to run the different processes here at the plant. And so all of that cost would be added on also. And I'm not sure if we ever ended up getting a full breakdown of that yet. But it was a lot of money.
We're meeting next week to go over that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so that was a whole other price factor to bring into the equation.
One of the things we're looking at was, okay, well, what would it cost us to rent one of those generators, and what would it cost to rent? There are 3 essentially critical facilities that we need generator backup for here at the plant, and what would it cost to rent those 3 smaller generators? And that's something that Cliff and Jared are looking at to try and evaluate and give us some costs. We're going to meet about that issue again next week and have further discussions on what kind of backup and reliability, what kind of investments we should be making in that way. We may be able to work with a generator provider to have generators available within a 24-hour period, but what would that cost us? And those are things we would want to evaluate going forward.
And balance that versus 1.2 million.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
Yep.
Right. Okay. Well, very good.
Well, we appreciate you letting us know, and we'll just get the numbers and then see how comfortable we are.
Several other, I suggest you read this. There's a little discussion about the 2 spills that we had in the last couple of weeks. Also on the one on Washone and the one on up on Gardner Mountain.
And we're going to give a presentation on both those spills here during staff report period.
Oh, okay.
It's on our agenda, and just to let you know, they email us this report always right after it's prepared. So. Is any board? Yes.
So the other ad hoc meeting was the workforce housing.
Oh, right.
Committee meeting that Jim and Dwayne attended with Paul and I, they've settled on a pilot project. Developer has a couple lots in town, and the aim for the committee is to see if we can't get a workforce housing pilot project started, groundbreaking next summer. That's the aim that was set at the meeting. Divided the group up into some subcommittees to work on policy, on development, on public outreach, and so that's what was going on there. Did you want to have anything to fill in, Dwayne?
Yeah, I appreciated you guys, all of you, being there. The one thing, of course, I would say, but I believe is true, is the fact that the utility district has done something was mentioned many times, and I do believe we sort of lit the match a little bit. I believe that it felt to be like we have, and if we have, then that's good. That's on the good side. On the bad side of that, I was next to Joanne Marchetta, and she kept saying, as did Austin Sass and some others in their committees, is, well, it doesn't matter because it's not that much money for the various agencies. We don't need to cut our fees any. It's about 7%, and Paul was there. I think we figured about between 40 and 50%. If you could get ground and fees, you could knock that much off. Then if you could knock off and go with the prefab housing, you could get a project down to where it would pencil. And that's about the only way, is with free land and those things, maybe just with free land. The other is they talked about another project, and that would be tearing down a motel and rebuilding it, which I'm definitely for, except that it wouldn't add new housing. It would upgrade it. And it would actually lose a few units, because most motels are single rooms, and so it would take 2 or 3 rooms to make a room. So I'm hoping that we do the other project first. And I wasn't crazy about the idea that they wouldn't tell us where the pieces of property were. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. But all in all, and I made one statement, and that's that how I got involved with the utility district here was, I think, 1988, 89, when you were 2, I think. We had a community housing deal. We were going to solve affordable housing. And I came to the utility district. I was assigned to be the guy who learned about it. So I met Jim Kofer. But my point was let's quit studying and let's start doing. And it's real simple. Get less expensive land, have the agencies cut what they can cut, and use an inexpensive building process. It doesn't have to look like, $1 million condos. We just need some places for people to stay. So, but everybody recognizes, everybody there, and there was a lot of people there, that there was a problem. Paul, what were your observations?
Same as you, and actually I was very pleased that mentioned at the top of the list twice for making some movement to help out the process. One comment I did want to make is just about the district participating in these meetings. It appeared to me that there was not a need for 3 STPUD people to and Wayne's kind of a big personality for those that don't know that.
What? He certainly keeps quiet, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I'm reserved. You even got into the media here the other day, too.
I'm reserved.
So I was thinking maybe instead of everybody going to these, that maybe Dwayne would go as the representative, and we could be his backup or something.
As often as I could. The only good thing is we ought to, if we all go, we ought to divide into separate committees. They drew me into another committee, and I was able to kind of talk to them a little bit. But it's just common sense. You just can't meet, study. It all comes down to what your basic cost is. It's just not rocket science. We need to, if the city and the Conservancy and under Burton Santini Act, all that land is out here, then somebody needs to step up, put it down, and away we go. It's not rocket science. And boy, is there ever a need. And these manufactured homes, I saw some of the pictures of. There was one in our group. It was nice. So, yeah, probably 2 or 3 of us is plenty. And I'll go as often as I can. My wife was there too, so.
We'll just coordinate for future meetings.
I'd say at least a couple of us. But it was very nice. They had us on all their documents saying utility district, and that was the hope, is that we could get people going.
Okay, I think that does it for the standing and ad hoc committee. How about board member reports? Very good. Anything new with the Eldorado?
We didn't meet.
Didn't meet.
But the only thing I wanted to mention was the engineering department and Lynn put together our submittals for the Eldorado County Water Agency, grant program, the 50% match for planning and design efforts. About 8 or 9 projects, submitted about a $450,000 request. So I signed all those forms this week, and they were due on by tomorrow. So we've accomplished that. And then at the May meeting, May 9th, they'll be considered. By then, hopefully, we'll get a review and an eligibility stamping, from them, and then they'll work those, as many as can fit into their budget process in June. So we're on schedule with that. And then moving right along, since I'm next, only thing I wanted to report on was we had a meeting yesterday. Jim, Shannon, myself, and Gary went down and met with the Alpine County folks, the CAO and the attorney, and we received a request to reopen our contract with Alpine County and to form an ad hoc committee to talk about the contract. And the bottom line is that they have requested that because they feel like it's a political necessity for their board of supervisors, based upon the contract being the subject of the last 3 Alpine County grand juries, that it's a necessity that they at least make the effort to sit down and talk about the contract with us. Whether in the end changes are made, or i.e., we pay them more money as mitigation, it would be a result of lengthy discussions and what they call an educational process, potentially on our part for their benefit, in terms of what are all the benefits of them receiving our recycled water and not the potential pitfalls. So our plan is that if with your nod, we will put together a bunch of information, anything you can think of, and in 2 weeks at the next board meeting, we'd be able to have a lengthy discussion about the information surrounding our contract with the whys and wherefores, and what their grand jury has said and everything else. And because their attorney at one point, in essence, threw a veiled threat on the table, which us non-attorneys took as a litigation threat, we would hold these discussions in closed session under potential litigation, future litigation, and so we could talk frankly about the topics and about Alpine County and all things related. So
I think that's a good idea. We have discussed this topic before, yes. and every time one of their grand jury reports comes out, right, we discuss it. But I think it's a good idea that we do it a little more in depth, because it looks like we're going to head down the road of discussing it with them again.
Yeah. I mean, they basically said, we could say no, we're not even going to talk about it, but they say that would, we all agree that right now we have a good working relationship with Alpine County, although as Jim said, it's all it's mostly coming from us.
Well, yeah,
it's like
exactly.
We're sending down the recycled water, we're sending down the money, and it's like, but they basically said that the working relationship would be wrecked if we just said we refuse to talk to you. So I think
your recommendation is we talk together about it, all of
yes,
us.
Right.
And then
I really want to do that.
Yes.
So that's good. I'm supposed to be the rep. I've been busy, but I would have, whenever I can, I want to go to any of those kind of things and help.
Well, part of if we do have further discussions with them, they wanted to have it in the form of committees, assigned committees. So part of, start thinking about who you would like to have.
Good cop.
Well, who would you like to have in terms of two of you being on an ad hoc committee to meet with two members of the supervisors and the attorneys and senior staff, and it would probably occur around the meetings, to save Gary travel time. It would occur around our own board meetings, either the Wednesday, the day before or the morning of, in terms of schedule. And they did say there's no super rush on this, that I think they just need to report back to the people making all the comments in Alpine County that we're talking about the contract, and then we can take plenty of time to talk through all the issues and talk about whatever anybody wants to say. So if I saw enough nods, we'll plan on putting it on the next agenda in closed session.
Very good. Do you have anything else?
That's it for me.
Okay. Chris is going to tell us all why my street looked like a war zone in front of my house the other day.
Before we get started, I'd like to take a couple minutes if I could. I'd like to introduce you to the new pumps department supervisor, Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
We got interviews Monday, and Jeremy was a successful candidate, so I just wanted to get it out there so you guys all knew. Okay.
Very good.
You'll see him at Faz's office. You saw Phil.
You see him, just to let you know.
I've had a lot of conversations with him lately. He's very intelligent, and my relationship's going to have to change, because Phil and I used to glare at each other and things like that. I'm scared of him.
Yeah. He's just a big teddy bear.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to treat him nice. I can't yell at him like I did Phil.
Well, I'm here today to talk about the sewer spill on Gardner Mountain Sewer Station there. I'm sure you guys are already all aware of it. Thursday, April 5th, we were called out. The staff went out to what was possible water leak. And when they went out there, water was coming out of the intersection. And there's a map there at Julie and Gardner. And looking at the initial water coming out, it was clear. There was no smell. It would come on, it would leak for a little bit and then kind of go away, which we've seen in groundwater before. So they did a chlorine test, which we do with all water leaks, and there was no chlorine in it. So we assumed that it was just groundwater. Well, Friday, April 6th, Tony went back out to double check on it, see how it was going, because it was coming right off the road into a guy's yard, but it was very minimal. But when he went out Friday, there was toilet paper, there was sewage on the road. Not big pieces, but enough to tell it was sewage. So he had called me, and what I suggested was to keep an eye on it, get some pump run guys out there, and let's check with the cycling of the pump in the station. Sure enough, each time that pump would come on, it would boil up out of the ground. So the war zone, yes. When we have a sewer spill like that, I get every...
There was what, 2 vac trucks,
Yes, sir.
Backhoe,
and about 8 people. But that's me. Whenever we have a sewer spill like that, not knowing exactly the extent of everything, I get every available body out there to try to be able to suck up the sewage, prevent it from going where we don't want it to go. So that's what I did. And turns out we dug it up in the intersection there, and there is a 4-inch force main that comes from Gardner Station and comes up around the corner and goes in and dumps into a gravity sewer up by your house.
right in front of my house. Right.
Yes.
That's the crown on the street.
Exactly. So we went right down on it. Rob Tucker from Lahontan was out there, and we started discussing what was going on. And there's no real way to estimate an exact amount, but we figured about 500 gallons. Everybody was satisfied with that. But if you look at the force main there, you got to look real close. That black hole is the actual hole in the main, but it almost, you see the scratches that come down from it?
Yeah.
There's a scratch there, and then on the top side, just on the back where you just barely see it, there's another scratch there. So
They were a little more obvious in person.
yes.
Yeah.
When we see things like that, we know right away that's a backhoe tooth.
Yeah, that's an installation thing.
Yes. Well, installation, or there's been some work with gas lines
Yeah.
and things around there, so it could be several different things. But it was obviously hit before. But the way the 2 scratches are, normally with a backhoe tooth, they're only 3-4 inches apart. This is about 6 or so you can pretty much assume and be correct that they hit it at one point and probably hit it at another point. And the black tar that's on there, it almost just appeared to me that they put ram neck or something on it. And there was a hole previous, somebody had noticed. They tried to patch it with some ram neck, put some dirt on it.
Didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, it didn't work. You can see the black outer circle there.
I think it was like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years ago, the gas company was out there doing stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the original gas line that was put in, actually I have a gentleman that works for me that did the house right there. And that was several years ago. That would probably be 20 plus years ago on some of that. Not saying the gas company did it, but at one point or another, somebody did hit that. There's another view of it there. You can see from the top of the chute
more
down
on
the
the
side.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Thursday afternoon with the clear water, it had not made a nice tunnel yet up to the asphalt. So it was being filtered out is what it was being. Friday morning, it was not being filtered anymore. Sewage started to come out of it. This picture here, from where the leak was, it went down the street a little bit and then hit a culvert. Well, that culvert comes out, and on the right picture there, you can see that culvert coming into that ditch. And we had sewage hit that culvert and hit that ditch. The lab did come out. Lahontan was out there. We all went out and talked and looked at it. They did some ammonia test, which right away tells you that it's sewage. There wasn't any. They did a test or two. There was so much water basically running in this creek that it diluted right away. And Lahontan was okay with that also. But that's pretty much the extent of what happened. I know some of you know it received an email, but I wanted to come up here, let you know that yes, we did see it Thursday. We thought it was a water leak or groundwater at the point at that time.
I actually went out and talked to the guys. They said, "Oh, it's just a spring."
That's what it appeared to be. There was no
Yeah,
smell,
groundwater.
no nothing.
Yeah.
But
And I saw it. You're right. There was nothing.
unfortunately, it was a sewer leak. That was a catch.
And so all you did was put a repair band on it.
Yes.
You didn't have to cut sections out. And
No, what
it's
we
very
did
easy.
on that pipe, the scratches were only probably total length about a foot. So what we did is we've got a 20-inch full circle clamp put on top of it and good to go. So, and tell your wife thank you again for all the chocolate treats she bought for my guys. They're all happy.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't bake you cookies. She does that stuff too.
Oh, I wish I'd known that. Very nicely.
Talk about a better half, huh?
I would never deny that.
So
Not with
that
looking
was
at me.
one. The second one was a pretty major spill, and Shannon
That's
would
what
like,
I'm here for.
Shannon would like to discuss that.
So on Sunday afternoon, we received a call. The district operations staff received a call of a manhole overflowing off of Meskwaki Drive over by Onontiaga. So I can barely see this thing, but essentially this road that is highlighted is Meskwaki, and the spill was right in this area. If you can see yes, you can see my mouse, where Onontiaga wraps around and ends. There's a manhole down here between Washoan and Meskwaki. And the call again came in, and that the sewer was spilling, and staff responded very quickly. They were able to on a Sunday afternoon. They were able to mobilize the resources and had the blockage in the pipe itself broken within about 90 minutes of the actual phone call being received here at the district. It's pretty remarkable response time, and I was very impressed to hear that, particularly on a weekend day. So I think we have something definitely to be proud of. We definitely have some things about this spill not to be proud of. You can see from this picture when the spill was taking place, this was when they first arrived on scene, that it's lifting the manhole cover off of that manhole, so there's quite a bit of flow coming through there. And you can see on this next picture, it's a little difficult to see, but there's debris down here, and I didn't end up capturing, I think, the best pictures that show the debris from the sewage that's around this area. But something you can look at is this particular branch right here. You can see that there's toilet paper and whatnot on this branch, which is actually pretty good ways out of the water. In my mind, that's an indicator that this has spilled previously during potentially a high flow event, that this stoppage was ongoing potentially for some unknown period of time prior to us being aware of it. Given that we had previous rain events, we're not positive of when that spill actually took place. We, however, estimate from the time that we heard about the spill to the time when we've broken the spill or broken the blockage that we spilled 2,300 to 2,500 gallons, and it's really unknowable how much may have spilled before that. Again, the 90-minute response time to break that spill is definitely something to be proud of. However, some things we're not proud of, and some things that we've taken actions to rectify is that we had lab samples taken at the time that afternoon. Sunday afternoon, lab staff went out and collected samples, and those lab samples, they take about 24 hours for the E. coli results to show up because they have to they have to evaluate them. The E. coli samples have to grow, and the lab goes through its protocols. About 24 hours later, they give reports on that. And so those lab results came in Monday evening, Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday morning, Chris and I saw those lab samples and realized, wow, that E. coli number is really, really high. Typically, what's called the primary contact level for E. coli is about 100 E. coli in 100 milliliters of water. And the results for this spill were in the 1,700 to 2,000 range for this. And that primary contact level is for recreational areas, so it's often the level of 100 is the level that they use to close beaches, and so it's for somebody swimming in that water is what that primary contact for recreation level is set at. So Tuesday morning, we start looking at that information and see that, and we realize we have a creek or a stream in the middle of a neighborhood on spring break with good weather, and boy, we need to get out. We need to do something about this. And so Chris mobilized his staff to print up some signs and go out there and post them in this area to keep kids and people's pets from getting into that creek and getting exposed to that sewage. That, unfortunately, by the time we got the signs out there, it's 48 hours after the time we realized that we had a spill going on out there. And that's really unacceptable. We had exposure. We talked with folks out there who had their teenage kids who were on spring break, who were out there playing hide and seek in this area, not knowing that a sewer spill had happened above this area. And so we got the signage out. We received a call Tuesday evening from a customer saying, what's going on? I see these signs, what's happening? We started talking with them, and they said, okay, that's why all the neighborhood is kind of up in arms, what's going on? They want to know what's going on. And so we proceeded to set up a community neighborhood meeting out there at 5 o'clock on Wednesday evening. We put out, Chris's staff again mobilized, printed up some signs. We put out door hangers in the vicinity of the spill so that we could try and get as many people as possible out to a neighborhood meeting on very short notice. And we held the meeting out there. We had between 6 and 8 community members come out and meet with us on the site, and they were pretty upset, understandably so. We owned that we made a mistake by not posting those signs earlier. We quite honestly don't have these types of spills. This is not something we have a ton of experience with. Typically, when we have sewer spills, they're like the spill we had on the previous Thursday, and they're in a paved area or an area that we identify quickly enough that we're able to clean it up without exposure to the surface waters, or that exposure is such a small amount that, as with the spill on the Friday and Saturday, or Thursday and Friday, is so small that we don't have a real risk to the community. This created a risk to our community members. And so we've initiated protocols now within the department that we were getting permanent signs printed up. We're going to be carrying that within our sewer vehicles so that, and we've had some meetings about this protocol of if the senior staff member on that job site that responding to that spill evaluates and makes a decision that they think there is a risk of community members being exposed to that raw sewage, they're going to post those signs. That's going to increase our awareness in the community. People are going to respond to that more. They're going to see these signs. They're going to ask questions. We think that that's definitely the way to go. We'd much rather have them calling and raise our profile that we've had a sewer spill rather than having somebody get sick because they've been exposed to that sewage. We have also, and from this picture you can kind of see that this little drainage channel is here, and you can see that there's houses on the other side. This happens to be in a vacant CTC lot. So the cause of the spill was the following day. The TV truck went out there and the hydrovac was out there cleaning the line. And what they identified was that there are laterals that come in on these vacant CTC and U.S. Forest Service lots into the sewer main, and those laterals are full of roots that have grown in through the sewer laterals. And those sewer laterals, somebody upstream of this site has been flushing some very stout disposable wipes, which I think maybe somebody thinks that they're disposable shop rags or something, and they're flushing them down the toilet. Doug said when the spill was broken, he was trying to pull the wad of rags apart, and he couldn't even get them broken apart. These were much more than your average disposable wipes that you see, at Rayleigh's and other places. So definitely, we're not sure what's happening there, but those wipes or that fibrous material was getting caught up on those roots, and that's really what caused this blockage. So since then, we have hydro-cleaned the line. We've applied a root killer to the pipes in order to kill those off and prevent the blockages from happening in the near term. We also initiated the water quality testing. Typically, we're out there one time after a spill, and the lab samples are fine. We don't go back. After our community meeting, we heard from the community that, hey, we not only want you to test where you've identified downstream of the spill, we want you to test upstream. We also want you to look at this meadow that's on the other side. There's a pond that kids play in, and there's a roadside ditch that has now a big algae bloom going on that they've never seen before. We want you to test those areas as well. So we greatly expanded our water quality testing. From that community meeting, we got emails and developed an email list, and Chris has been sending out daily updates on the lab reports and the results that we received from the water quality testing, letting people know what was going on. And I'm happy to say that actually, as of really 2 days ago, the final samples have been taken, and everything is back well below that 100 E. coli per 100 milliliter limit. And so we'll be out there actually today removing all the signs, finally removing all the signs. We have condensed the area as we got sampling back from the creek, for example, saying that was clear. We removed some signage and flagging from those areas, and so we'll be out there today removing the rest of those. And so that distribution's been happening every day. We've been in contact with the community and telling them what's going on. And of course, as you can see from this slide, the staff have also cleaned up the area, this area where we had an algae plume going on. Staff were out there and vacuumed up basically that algae out of this roadside ditch to get that all cleaned up and looking much better. And we received emails from the community thanking us for doing that. We have a bunch of actions planned going forward. We're going to clean these lines monthly until we permanently fix the problem, and we'll be sending the TV camera down these pipes every 2 months to ensure that we're not having an additional blockage. One of the issues is that this is the third time there's been problems on this line in the past, say, 5 years, and none of them previously resulted in a significant spill, or really even a spill. We had a spill underneath a house from a water backing up in the line, and we had a gurgling manhole. But this was the first time it's resulted in a spill. But when we ever run into problems like that, and actually anytime we do have a spill, we're initiating protocols that we will TV that line within a few weeks of that spill actually occurring. We will not allow this to happen again, where we have a spill or a close to a near miss spill happen, and we not go in there and be looking at that line and find out what the problem is. So we're fixing that issue as well. We're issuing letters to the upstream property owners about these wipes to say, we spilled here, this is a problem, don't do this. And we're also going to be doing a district-wide campaign on flushing wipes and hopefully get some people to not do that within our sewer system. And we're also going to be going back, we have an expectation we'll go back this summer, and we'll be using those short sections of liners with our contract with ProPipe, and going in and lining this pipe in places in order to block off these laterals, as we've done in the past couple of years on CTC and Forest Service lots. We'll be doing it in this area. Our expectation is that will permanently fix this problem, and if we won't, we don't expect to have future issues here.
You know if those lots are buildable or not?
What's that?
Are those lots buildable at all?
They seemed awfully wet to me, but that we have to talk to CTC and Forest Service and affirm that they're accepting that we're going to do that. But and then we'll have to negotiate. If they're not going to let us block off those lots, we're going to have conversations with them about fixing their
about their responsibility.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
CTC paid us reimbursement.
So none of those are privately owned. None of those lots with those laterals.
Which two? I don't know.
I actually was looking at the mapping yesterday that Jim Kelly developed, and it appeared to me that they were actually all Forest Service or CTC, but we'll have to do more evaluation.
If they're in a kind of a meadowy kind of area, they probably have been bought up. Yeah.
I've told you a lot of information, and I know you've seen the email and articles previously, but I wanted you to know we're taking responsibility that we had a mistake and a failure, and that we're fixing that with the protocols that we're doing. We're also going to be documenting this signage issue and putting it at the signage protocol and put it into our SSMP plan. When we were out there at the community meeting, Rob Tucker from Lahontan was also there, and so has participated. He knows exactly everything that's going on as far as our regulators are concerned.
But if you don't mind, 2 questions. One is that, do you anticipate a fine?
I do not. Well, I have no idea. What we have heard so far from Rob Tucker is that he's not on the enforcement side, but that he will, write up everything that had occurred and supply that to the enforcement folks, but that he would, to some extent, I don't want to put words in his mouth, the implication I got was that he would advocate for us against having a fine. We also have actually heard from the community members that we've met with out there that if Lahontan tries to proceed with a fine against us, they want to know about it and they want to be there to advocate for us against those fines happening.
And
they know because one of the persons there was an employee of Lahontan.
One of those persons there was an employee of Lahontan. She was very clear in separating out her employment from her being a homeowner. She was very good about that. In every conversation that we had with her, she said she's not representing Lahontan in any way. I believe she works out of Leviathan.
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah, she was involved, so she knows what's going on there.
Leviathan is pollution. When it comes to the root killer, is that a one-time application, and does that cause any problems with pollution?
It does not. Let my expert tell you about it.
You guys.
For the most part, when we've root X'd some and gone back and cleared the line and cleaned the line, we haven't had intrusion back again over the 8 years I've been using it. So they say it should be good for 3 and 4 years. So far, we've been lucky and we haven't had a big problem. It's whether it foams up enough to get to the roots, to the end of the roots that are coming into the main after we had cleaned it, so we get the camera down.
And it doesn't hurt the water, like in the pond or anything?
No. That wouldn't be flowing in the pond. That stays right in our main.
The foam is inside the pipe.
It's inside the pipe.
Yeah.
Shoot it in there and it stays in
Yeah,
there?
it's
that actually
diluted.
root that it's in contact with.
I get it.
The time it reaches the plant, it's
Get it?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even see impacts to the plants
That's only
up
ours.
above ground that have had their roots basically killed off that have entered into the pipe. And it's-
And what is in case a member of the public asks this, how many years has it been since we've really had any spills like that?
Well, spills, let me differentiate. Every year we will have spills, but they are on the collection system. They tend to be very small, and we resolve them relatively quickly.
Like the Gardner Mountain one is what you're
Like
saying?
the Gardner Mountain one. That's, I would say, other than that was a force main, that kind of situation is typical for our experience.
Well, like last winter during the I&I events, we had three spills.
Right, the
spills
one
were
at the trailer park.
Yeah, but the spills are into basically a flood, and so there's there's nothing to test because it's diluted by stormwater tremendously, and so if you went out and tested it, you wouldn't have this anywhere near this 100 E. coli per million. It would be diluted.
So Doug has that experience. I mean, in your career here, have you seen a spill like this where we've dumped into a creek and had this kind of exposure?
The 8 years I've been actually boss of sewer, I haven't had anything like that. Previous 25 years ago, I remember spending a Christmas Eve behind Motel 6 for New Year's Eve. But that was many moons ago.
In my mind, we're talking decades since we've had a spill where we've had some sort of threat to public safety.
Completely different standards and methods.
Yes, and that's why we weren't prepared for this. We should have been. Not acceptable. We fixed that issue, and we're not going to let this. We're going to be much more conservative with this issue going forward.
We actually have a pretty good record when you start comparing to other places around the state. They have records on like numbers of spills per mile of sewer lines.
Or per day.
Per day, or whatever. But ours has always been quite low.
Just one more comment. If you look at the industry, more often than not, it's the county health departments that actually ribbon off, sign off, block areas until the pollution is, or the dilution takes effect. So that's again another reason why we weren't necessarily prepared with signs and a protocol, but obviously, it's our sewage, it's our system, and we're taking the proactive approach here to protect our customers.
We have had questions about should we go out there and put up the orange fencing and block it off and actually prevent people from getting into the stream. In my mind, at least, we don't own that property. We actually don't have any authority to block off someone's private property or property owned by CPC or the Forest Service. But we do have authority to put this signage up, and we're going to take that conservative step to do that.
And we put up the construction riveting to make sure it was really clear that there was some signs and it was that tape around. Obviously, if somebody wanted to insist on getting in there, they could duck under the tape, but it made it very obvious the area that we were talking about. So, and that's what we wanted.
With respect to the spills, to go back to your question earlier, Dwayne, I want to differentiate three pieces of the district, right? So the waste treatment plant, where we've had decades of meeting our waste discharge requirement and have not had spills. Our pump stations, where we have also had decades of not having spills, knock on wood. And then our collection system, which is different because it's really vulnerable, particularly to these wipes. And when you add wipes with roots or wipes with grease,
or a stump,
it's real easy. What's that?
Or somebody dumps a stump down the manhole.
That's exactly, or actually, some actual physical blockage. Though it's vulnerable, and that's why this district has had spills. It's in our collection system, and it's really something that every collection system in the world has these issues, and it's unfortunate, but it's reality that these kind of blockages occur. But it's why you have funded us and given us the resources of both the manpower and having 24-hour staffing and standby crews, as well as the equipment with the hydrovac in order to go out there and be able to break this kind of blockage within 90 minutes. It's because you've spent the additional money to have the resources available in this district that we're able to do that and respond in that way.
About 10 years ago, I think Dennis Caulking had a program where he was about the disposable wipes and not to be flushing them down the toilet. I was in Costco the other day, and I wasn't looking for them, but I happened to walk by a stack of those wipes, and they say flushable. And these were the Kirkland brand, the Costco brand name, and maybe we need to do something again. And Randy, at the CASA conference, there was a big discussion about not only is it causing,
causing everybody trouble.
Yeah, and in plants too. In the treatment plants, it's plugging up a lot of things.
And there's been significant efforts to try legislation. There's actually been, my understanding, I haven't researched this in detail, but there was a city that actually outlawed that banned them outright. They got sued and they lost that suit.
Yeah, they've been trying to work with the companies that do produce them, but they have ways of getting around it, and maybe we just need to advertise it again like we do every once in a while.
We're absolutely planning to do a district-wide campaign with that in mind.
And we've done that before. I've had the conversation with Kay Reed. She said, "Oh, you guys have done that before." I said, "Yeah, well, obviously it's not good enough. We need to do more, but there are people who still use it." So
people moving in and out of town all the time. They don't know.
As far as the signage goes, I asked Rob Tucker from Lahontan about it. Nothing's ever been mentioned, and we've never talked about it because, like you said, spills are on the road or something simpler than what we've experienced. And he said they do not have the authority to make us put up signs, which I do not know. So it's going to be on us.
Well, I'll go one step further. Is you ask Lahontan, so who would be responsible for closing this area? And they say the county health department. If you ask the county health department, they'll say Lahontan.
I say do it and let them tell us to take them down.
Well, no one's complained about our sign.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't
no
think
one has said that. It's actually physically closing it. That's a different story, and we don't have. We'll put up our signs.
Looking at the other side of it, I don't see any downside or liability to us putting signs up. So we might as well put them up.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
exactly.
I would like to say one thing. I've been responsible for the water and sewer system, basically, and we made some mistakes. The Thursday one, this sewer stoppage, I take full responsibility for it, and it will not happen again. As far as the signage, things like that, we will do better. Guarantee it. But it is on me.
Hopefully with the more TV and sewer lines out there, we'll catch more of these before they get, so it should be on top of us.
The one thing I would say was that when they TV'd this line, it's an old, probably a 50-year-old clay pipe in fantastic shape. Pipe itself, this is what I'm hearing. The pipe itself was actually in great shape. So that's
white's going through it.
That's right.
Cleaning it out.
Anything further for us? Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate that. Gary.
I don't want to be yelled at either. Just wanted to give you a brief update. The district earlier this year received notification from the state board about the existing water rights that this district holds, surface water rights. What's happening is, and I won't go too far back, but there was a settlement act in the early 90s, and that resulted in a public law called 101-618 that was approved by Congress that put in place provisions of division of water between California and Nevada, both in the lake and on the Truckee River. Since then, Truckee River Operating Agreement was negotiated. That was signed in 2008. There are several conditions that were required to be satisfied before TROA went into effect. Those were resolved, and then TROA was effective in December 2015. Since that time, I suspect that the state board was then looking at what water rights and permits and so forth were existing within the Tahoe Basin, and they have now, earlier this year, reached out and contacted anyone that had either an application, a petition, or a permit in place, because during this whole process, the state board was not acting on anything. Everything was basically frozen until TROA was implemented. And so they've asked the district to take a look at its water rights and let them know how the district wants to proceed with those. And the district has a number of applications and permits and petitions sitting there right now. And all those were all acquired from water companies the district acquired through the years. And so they're all now in the district's name. So we've talked to Chris, and Chris had requested a copy service to go in and get copies of all the state board files dealing with all these permits. We have those records now, and we're in the process of going through those and evaluating them. And the goal is basically to get our arms around the different types of water rights, surface water rights that the district currently either has or have applications for, in order to determine the best strategy and to make best decisions for the district in if and what water rights you want to pursue in the lake. And that may not, when I say pursue that, doesn't mean necessarily you're going to go out and build a surface water treatment plant at this point, but it would get into your planning process that will then enable you to make decisions of what, if any, you want to maintain, what the level effort's going to be to maintain those water rights, and which ones you may want to just let go. So we're in the process of doing that right now. The state board had given a deadline of May 1st to provide them with the decision what you wanted to do with each of these water rights. We had Jenna and I in our office had talked to the state board last week. We have another call scheduled with them on April 30th to let them know preliminary what we want to do. And I think the approach, and we just had a meeting today with your district management to talk about these water rights. And I think the consensus was that we should ask the state board for an extension because we're still in the process of evaluating the water rights. We're not ready to make recommend a decision at this point. And so we're going to talk to them on the 30th as to what we intend to do and why we intend to do it. A lot of it has to do with there's just a large volume of material to go through to understand the history behind these water rights. So we anticipate requesting an extension of time from them, probably for in the range of 3 months or so, to be able to finish this and then gather the information in some sort of organized fashion that will enable us to evaluate with management on which water rights we think are best to pursue, if any, and then if so, we can make some decisions and bring that back to the board for discussion in a lot more detail. So we will have the idea is to have a extension request to the state board. Probably we'll send it out on April 30th. And in our discussions with them, and I think with Chris's too, they've indicated that they're not necessarily going to be opposed to an extension, as long as you provide them the reasons why and how long you need it in order to provide them answers to their questions. So that's a very quick summary of kind of what we're doing right now.
Any benefits to coordinating with the other water purveyors in the basin, North Shore Water Agency?
I know they're going through the same process. I know there was a request from, was it North Tahoe, that came in for some information. I think Chris got that to them. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have a conversation with them, right, and just to touch base as to what they're doing. There are, just briefly, there's about 20, California was allocated 23,000 acre feet. There is currently, DWR, after the control was effective, they issued a water use report for 2016 and another one in 2017. Of the California water rights, there's only about 11,000 water rights being diverted, and that includes both surface and groundwater diversions. And so there's a good portion of the water rights that are not being diverted at this point. So it's not to a point where the lake, the basin's being over appropriated at this time. There's a fair amount of water still to go after and secure. And there'll be part of our analysis is why would you want surface water rights? What things could happen that you may want to have those type of assets in your portfolio to use if you for some reason you have to curtail some groundwater pumping somewhere. And so the idea is to bring through not just the analysis of the water rights, but why you would want to do that in case of certain events, and we'll try to flush those out in more detail later on.
I would say as far as coordination is concerned, in my mind, the most important folks is coordinating with our locals. So it's moving brothers, Tahoe, Lakeside, and they're part of our stable groundwater agency stakeholder site.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. So, Paul, you wanted to briefly talk about what Sacramento's latest scheme is.
I didn't say briefly.
That was a hint, by the way.
No, it will be brief because it's kind of in the early stages anyway. But it is regarding redevelopment agencies. There has been some movement in Sacramento to try to resurrect them. If you recall, the redevelopment agencies were dissolved back in 2011, strongly supported by and pushed by the governor's office at that time. One of the reasons was to help balance the state budget at that time, because that was in the recession when the state was underfunded. And they were successful. They were dissolved, and it actually made a lot of special districts and counties happy, because the property tax that was being diverted from them going to redevelopment agencies was going back to them, most of them. Unfortunately, it didn't benefit us, because the redevelopment agency here in South Lake Tahoe had outstanding debt that goes all the way up to 2040, so we will continue making that contribution until that date. So anyway, yes, two pieces of legislation have been proposed, Assembly Bill 3037 and 1778, and they're almost identical actually, have been proposed. Their purpose is somewhat different than the original redevelopment agencies, whose main purpose, or one of the main purposes, was to address blighted areas. This legislation is being developed for the purpose of addressing low-income housing and other infrastructure projects, including transit, water, sewer, flood control, etc. So it is very different, but the funding mechanism is the same. Currently, the language states that a portion of the tax increment from these taxing agencies, special districts, and counties will be funneled into these new redevelopment agencies without their consent. And so obviously that's the problem that our member associations have to deal with. So CSDA and CSAC, the State Association of Counties, is working with the authors of these two assembly bills to try to get that language in there. And I believe if they are successful, they will actually support it at that time, because they believe it is a good purpose. So like I said, though, it's early stage, and we'll continue to monitor, and we'll update you as appropriate.
Thanks. Okay, we are, I guess, at the end of this, unless there's any other staffer reports or anything. Okay, you can see past and future meetings, and we have a couple things to talk about in closed session, so let's go out of open session in the closed session.
I get it.
That's it. Coming out of closed session into open session, nothing to report, meeting adjourned.